I don't know what I'm doing. And I just blew up because Gene's artwork was just so magnificent. And I raised a ruckus and all this stuff. I go home, I get a phone call saying Stan wants to see you tomorrow morning. So I go in, and Vinny's there, and Stan says, you were complaining about Vinny, and you attacked him or something like that. And what's going on? I said, well, he removed all the backgrounds, and I was really horrified and all of this stuff. And Vinny said, no, I didn't. And Stan said, he says he didn't. And Vinny's a close friend of Stan's, and he's been in the business 700 years. And what do you have to say about this? I said, I have Xeroxes of the pencils. And I brought them in, and Stan looked at them, went through page by page, and looked at the actual artwork, and turned to me and said, have them refixed. Next time, go through channels, don't attack anyone. You're right, you just handled it completely wrong. He took my side, gave me a lesson against one of his close friends. He was more interested in the quality of the books than even his own friendship things when he was dealing with things like that. And it taught me not to fly off the handle, which I ignored completely because I'm always flying off the handle. But he taught me very quickly and through really nice example. I expected to be fired. I was only there a week. I had no background there. And he was so interested in just making sure the books look good. I have other stories about him as well, and all of which had dealt with caring about what the books were like rather than who did it or anything else. That was totally secondary to him. The book came first in every one of those situations.
When you were in a position of hiring Marvel, you were editor,
yeah.
And you had to hire people, which meant you had to say no to people,
yeah.
And then you had to sometimes say to someone, you're not carrying your weight. Were you at all comfortable doing that?
No, I was horrified. There was one time I was editor-in-chief. I mean, I could tell people where things were right and where things were wrong and where it went, where a story failed, and I would do it in writing for the most part because I can organize my thoughts better in writing than I can verbally. But I remember one time having to fire somebody, and I was told I had to eliminate a certain number of people from the staff, and I just didn't know how to fire them. It's there, but for the grace of God go I, and I could see myself in that position, and I remember locking myself into my office, arguing with the people in charge, and they wanted me to fire the secretary, and I couldn't do it. It was horrifying. And finally I had to. There was no way around it. And I went outside, and she was so good. She said, I heard you arguing for me on the phone. She was right outside my office. Thank you.
And you fired it for eavesdropping. And isn't it interesting that there are people in that position who would be very happy to go fire someone?
It is.
Who would love that?
No, it's really interesting to listen to what you were saying. You forget what you do sometimes, and ways that actually help people that you don't even think of. Marty Pasco had some interview recently where he talked about the fact that I was the only editor who gave him written notes as to what worked and what didn't, but both sides. And all the others just either accepted or didn't, and I was telling him essentially what I was looking for on each script, and he really appreciated that because I wasn't just dismissing the stuff and I wasn't just ignoring, I was actually thinking about the stories, and he said no other editor had done that. It's really hard to fire. Occasionally you're ordered to fire somebody, and you just try to find a way to get around it. The best one that happened to me was I was told I had to fire a writer who the company disliked his work, and I kept going, no, this guy's really good. He's just totally on the wrong books. He's absolutely on the wrong books. But I read his outside scripts. I read his movie scripts. I know how good he is. And they said fire him, and we canceled the book that he was on because that's what they decided to do as a way of firing him instead of just coming out and saying it. So the book was canceled, and I immediately put him on a book that I thought he'd be good for. And a couple months later, the publisher came to me and said, I have no idea what you did to rewrite his stuff, but this stuff's great. And I said, I didn't do anything.
Wow.
I just put him on the right project. You have to match the people to the work. Not everybody can do everything.
Right. Good. All right.
Questions?
First, before I ask my question, at the risk of gushing, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Wolfman, for decades of excellent stories.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a kid from Kew Gardens to a kid from Flushing, thank you very much. The lifetime achievement was well deserved.
Thank you so much.
My question pertains to something that I've noticed on the social media induces more hatred and more vitriol than anything else, more than politics, more than standing for the national anthem. It's Lee and Kirby and who did what, and who created what, and who didn't create what.
I think you're asking that a panel or two early.
Oh, is that right? Should I withdraw the question?
You want to answer anything?
You know,
I think everybody's going to have views, but no one was there. And my preference is to believe they both did incredible work together, and who specifically did what is less important than the finished product. Those books, I had never seen a comic like the Fantastic Four. I don't think either of them separately would have created that book in that fashion. But when I was growing up, that was the best comic I had ever seen, and was the most imaginative comic I'd ever seen. And I like to think that the two of them, however they worked together, made that project work so well. And Spider-Man with Ditko and all the others is too.
In the book I'm doing on Jack now, I spend at least 100 pages explaining that. And I interviewed everybody.
take my money.
I'll take your money anytime you want, but it won't get you the book any faster. I interviewed everybody I could who was around at that time, including Stan and Jack, had great details. And I found that if you listened carefully and understood that both men were using certain terms like writing and creating by different definitions, their explanations fit together pretty well. And then you also had to ignore some later things that were said for self-serving purposes. And essentially what it is they created the books together. They were not 50-50 collaborations. If Marv and I sat down to create some new comics together, they would probably not be 50-50 collaborations. They might be 60-40 or 70-30, and sometimes his 30 might be more important than my 70, or my 20 might be more important than his 80. I mean, you know, sometimes the most big in a collaboration, the greatest contribution you make is say, I like the other idea better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when I had a writing partner, the way we worked, and the fellow named Dennis Palumbo, he wrote a book, he even said this in there, is you'd have an idea, and Mark would just throw out 23 ideas. And I'd say, what if we took idea 2 and idea 9 and put them together? Now, how do you quantify that? He picked out of my ideas and made them better and repackaged. You can't put a number value on that. And then, you know, later on, we might remember things differently. And even though I'd be right,
But you'd still be 20%.
yeah, you know, so the answer is these two guys created those you know, people forget that Siegel and Schuster created Superman by Jerry Siegel having the whole idea and taking it to Joe Shuster. And Schuster drew it up. Schuster had no input into the concept of Superman. He's still the co-creator of Superman. And obviously Jack had a lot of input into the ideas. Stan said that on many, many occasions. So they're co-creations. And there's elements in them, I think, you know, that came from Jack, or that came from Stan, whatever. That doesn't matter. I mean, when, you know, Lennon and McCartney were writing songs together, Lennon wrote that side part, and McCartney wrote that part, and maybe one of them was quantitatively longer, but one of them was more memorable. So,
Yeah. More? Yes.
Gentleman in the back.
Oh, Mr. Wolfman, yesterday you talked about using a grid approach with the Titans. It seems so simple and so elegant, but it's such a great idea for generating ideas. Where did you possibly come up with that?
Are you talking about the The character?
Exactly, like how the Starfire.
I was describing very, very quickly, because I did it yesterday, I was describing how we put together characters in a group. And in fact, any set of characters, I do a list of the names of the characters across the top and a list of the names, same names across the side. And the idea is, if say it's Raven, the first one will be, what does Raven think of Starfire? And you go into all the details as to what she actually thinks about the character. And then what does Raven think about this character than this? Then you go down, the next sheet will be, what does Starfire think about Raven? Because what I think about you is not the same as you think about me. And when you build enough of that into your characters, when you write enough of those things down or do it in your head or however you do it, you know immediately how the dialogue is going to go because you fully understand the characters. You know that somebody is going to state something in one way because of the way they think about this character, and the other one's going to answer in their voice and their character based on how they think about the person they're speaking with. And that allows me to fully understand the characters inside and out. And the longer the list, you keep adding to it as you learn these characters. You don't know these things right off the top. The first time you write a character, it's something that builds as you learn more about the character. And as you know more about them, they will tell you when you're doing something right and wrong. Because if you fully understand the character, you'll know that instinctively that they would not handle something a certain way or will not say something a certain way. So I do that, and next time maybe they'll have me do one of my writing seminars, and I do go into detail on that.
Here.
How did your collaboration with Sergio start out?
I was hanging around with Sergio all the time. He would do a drawing on a napkin, and I'd put words on it. And we just became good friends, and we started working together. And we got thrown together on a couple of projects. People would say to Sergio, "What writer do you want to work with?" And he'd say me, and he would say, "What artist do you want to work with?" I'd say, "How about Sergio?" And we just started collaborating. Maybe, and Marv will have the same view. Some of the greatest comics come out of friends working together. I mean, I've not been that happy with comics I've done with strangers over the years. I've been happy with comics I did with guys I could call on the phone, like Dan Spiegel and Will Mineo, and just talk to and go to lunch with. I think people we had common interests, and you develop shorthand with people. I could just say to Sergio, make this guy like my friend Harry, and if I hang anything, he's got it, instant. Oh yeah, we'll put Harry in this comic.
Yeah.
So.
Working with certain creators who you can sit down with and talk it over with is really good. And when you become friends with them, like I did with, say, George Perez or Gene Colan, it's even better because you're speaking to each other all the time. And if you have a respect for the other person, you let them go off and do their thing. You don't try to control every single moment of anything because that way people are not going to be doing their best work. And what you want to do is create a team that really understands how to do it together. There's a TV writer who has a wonderful blog named Ken Levine, and he always talks about the fact that he and his writing partner, they do comedy. If they do a joke, if one of them recommends a joke that the other doesn't like, they don't argue about it. They just come up with another joke that they both agree with. And that's the way I think teams should be. If you're going to fight over something, come up with another idea. This is an art. It's not a science. There isn't one way of doing anything.
We're here.
Mark, you were active as a teenager in fan.
So is Marv.
Yeah.
And you wrote letters to the comics.
So did Marv.
Yeah.
Marv had a letter published in Herbie.
Yes.
Do you remember those letters?
I remember, yeah. I wrote a lot of letters that were published in comics. Some of them even not rewritten to say other things that I didn't mean to say. They used to kind of rewrite the letters a lot and change them. I actually wrote a letter one time about an issue I didn't like, and they took out all the knots and changed it to a phrase. But yeah, it was it was very exciting to be in a comic book, even on the letter page.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, this is one of those. Marv will tell you, he's my witness to this, I have in my life a lot of incredible coincidences, and he has been there for several of them,
Yeah.
and witnessed them, things that people don't believe happened. The very first letter I ever had printed was in an issue of Aquaman. I don't remember the exact number, I remember 44 or 45, something like that. And I went to this drugstore called Parnan's Pharmacy in Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles, 3,000 miles from the comic industry. I remember that, 3,000 miles from the comic industry. And I picked up the new issue of Aquaman. I bought all the new comics, and I'm waiting in line to pay for them. I flipped over, and I see my letter. And I got like a cold chill. It was the first time I'd ever seen my letter, my name in print. Even if, obviously I wasn't paid for this, it was a stupid letter. And I go, gee, the new issue was great. Oh, wow, Nick Cardy's art was fabulous. It was one of those letters. And I just I felt my life change a little at that moment. And it was a very life-changing, exciting moment that would have meant nothing to anyone else but it meant to me. The man who edited that comic book and therefore compiled that letter page was a man named George Cashton. 45 years later, 50 years later, George Cashton passed away in a rest home across the street from Parnan's Pharmacy.
Oh, wow.
Parnan's Pharmacy was gone by then, but on Westwood Boulevard, right there. He had moved out to California, and his family had moved him out here, and I went to visit him in that facility and interviewed him about all the dirt that he wouldn't tell people in print. I like to go to see other people would go to interview people for fanzines and say, I want to interview you for my fanzine, and they would tell you the fanzine, the version they wanted in public. And I'd say, just talk to me. I'm not going to print it. And I got lots of true stories that way. I learned a lot more that way about comic history, and came to understand more about the industry and the way it operated, because people weren't. Do you ever meet Whitney Ellsworth?
No.
I interviewed Whitney. Anybody here know Whitney Ellsworth? He was the editor, and I interviewed him at one point for a fanzine, a mimeograph fanzine, that had a circulation of 200 copies. And Mr. Ellsworth gave answers like he was afraid if he said the wrong word, DC would fire him. And he was like terrified. He kept saying, "Shut off the tape recorder. Shut off the tape recorder. I can't answer that question." It'll be like, why is Lois Lane's hat pink? Things like that. And he was just so nervous about being interviewed and fearing that somehow he would say the wrong thing and destroy his life. And I wasn't asking, dirt. I was asking, who created Lex Luthor? Stuff like that. Stuff like that. And so I just found if you didn't run a tape recorder, you didn't have these people speaking for immediate print, you got a much more interesting view on the world.
Did it help you get a foothold in the industry at all?
The letters?
Yes.
Yes, the letters did. Remember I mentioned that earlier that I was asked to write for comics. What literally happened was that I had decided never to try to write for comics. And I get a letter one day from a man named Jack Miller, who was an editor at DC, saying, hey, your letters are very interesting. Have you ever thought of writing comics? And he asked me to submit some script ideas for Wonder Woman, which he had taken over editing. So I figured, okay, and I wrote some script ideas up. And Jack Miller wrote back to me and said, these are really good. I want to have you write Wonder Woman. I want you to, and I thought, I was 16 years old or 17 years old. And I thought, wow, I'm going to write Wonder Woman. And little did I know that before this could happen, Jack Miller would be fired. So then I got this letter from Mort Weisinger, who was the editor of Superman books, and he said the same thing. Would you like to write some scripts for me? I said, sure. So I actually wrote a Jimmy Olsen script. I wrote a book-length Jimmy Olsen script. I have a copy of it. And Marv, I'm going to tell you something. I mean, you and I, because you have never written a script this lousy in your life. Yours got printed. Mine would have put DC out of business. And it was very efficient because, sometimes you write lots of stories early on in your career, you make different mistakes. I made all the mistakes in one story. It was unbelievably awful, that script. And every couple of years, I haul it out and reread it. And I look like, the Scream and the painting, And then Weisinger I got these notes on it that were very instructive and very clever. I thought they were from Mort Weisinger. They were actually from Nelson Bridwell.
Of course.
And I wrote a script that he liked. and Weisinger said he was going to buy for Superboy. And then he got taken off Superboy. So in the meantime, Dick Giordano, who was in Charlton at the time, wrote to me and said, hey, your letters are very clever. Would you like to write some scripts for Ghostly Tales or Mini Ghosts of Dr. Graves? And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And I sent in a script, and he wrote back and he said, I got good news and bad news. This is a great script, I want to buy it, but bad news is we got a script freeze on now. We've got too many scripts backed up. So if it's okay with you, I'll buy it in a couple months. And I said, sure. And then Dick Giordano left Charlton. In fact, he went to DC, and one of the people he replaced was Jack Miller.
And which is the reason why I never wrote to Mark to say I want to buy any of your stories.
That's right.
And that's why I'm still in the business after
So I thought I wasn't going to write, that's the right for comics. I mean, I came as close as you can come and haven't succeeded. A very odd thing has happens in my career. I've been working for DC Comics since 1970, which is a hell of a long time. I've been to DC Comics gatherings where until like Marv or Russ Heath walked in, I had seniority. I was the longest DC tenure employee, all right? And over the years, DC has said no to nothing. Anytime I come up with an idea, I say to DC, let's do this book. Everybody who has to sign off says yes, and then they don't do it. There's some reason they don't say no to me. And you know, no is sometimes a good answer, because no can get you to the same place much faster. You know, and then yes, and 8 months later they haven't done the book, they haven't done the project. So,
But I think we have time for one more
Yeah.
question.
Somebody who hasn't answered before. How about this gentleman here? Yes.
Yeah, Marv, I think my favorite work by you is Tomb of Dracula.
Thank you.
And, you know, I was at the newsstand one day, I bought all the superhero magazines, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll try this vampire thing. And, you know, the characters, the artwork, the stories, it's like, this is really interesting, it's something different. So, how did you get into that, and can you describe your work with Tomb of Dracula a little bit?
Well, it's real strange because, as I mentioned, I had a reputation for not being the guy who hired for superheroes, but I had done all these mystery stories, mystery horror stories for DC, and even Marvel, because I did some of the Tower of Shadows. And I was assigned to work on Tomb of Dracula. The first two, I started with issue 7. The first 2 were done by Jerry Conway, the second 2 by Archie Goodwin, and the third 2 by Gardner Fox. But they already knew that Gardner wasn't going to continue and asked me to start with 7. Now I had and have never seen Dracula films. I was never interested in it. I've never seen a full Dracula film, you know, at that time period. To this date, I've never seen the Bela Lugosi film or any of the British Hammer films. I know they exist. It would be impossible, but I had no knowledge of any of that stuff. The only thing I knew was the novel, the original novel by Bram Stoker, and I loved the novel. So the approach that Stoker took, which was really about the characters who were hunting Dracula and the human story of these people, not Dracula himself, was my only guiding influence. And I think if I had seen the movies, I would have done a bad pastiche of a Hammer film or something.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into it from the literary side, and especially because the novel of Dracula is told in epistolary form. It's all letters from one person to another, or newspaper headlines, or police reports, or something like that. It's not written in third person. It's written in multiple first-person formats. You really got to understand the characters that Dracula was affecting. You knew nothing about Dracula himself, because he never wrote any of that stuff. So it's all how other people see it. And that's what gave me the guidance to write the book from the point of view of the characters. And that's what changed my writing style. And with Gene's artwork, which was just so brilliant and so incisive with real people, and you saw their emotions in their eyes, that taught me how to write, frankly. Gene's artwork is very, very responsible for anything that I learned to do, because if I was working with another good artist, and Marvel had tons of great artists at the time, they would not have centered on the characters the way Gene did. They would have centered maybe on the action. And that would have been a completely different book, and it wouldn't have let me grow and learn how to write. So.
Right. I'm doing a panel later about Jack Kirby and another panel later about Len Wein. So come to those.
I'm doing nothing.
You got things to do.
Yes, I do have.
Tell them what table you're at.
I actually don't know. I'm against the wall virtually in Artist Alley. I know where it is, I don't know the number. I'm actually going to vanish for a while because I have to do a podcast.
He just
and-
told the number, he just told the number.
What number?
104.
104.
Yes.
I'll be back probably about 2 o'clock because I have the podcast and a couple of things that they're having me do outside. So I'll be back about 2:30 depending.
Okay, and well, about 10 minutes, we'll have another fire drill. So,
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to listen to us.
Thank you.